in a world long forgotten by time, hidden deep within an impenetrable jungle, there lay the lost city of Aria. This ancient metropolis, once the crown jewel of a vast empire, had been buried under vines and trees for centuries, its towering structures swallowed by the relentless grasp of nature. Legends spoke of a treasure so great that it could change the course of history, and of a curse so powerful that no one had ever returned from Aria alive. Jackson Harper, an adventurous archaeologist, was determined to uncover the truth. With a worn-out map in hand and a heart full of courage, he set off into the unknown. The jungle was thick, the air humid, and the sound of wildlife echoed all around him, but nothing could deter him from his mission. After days of hacking through dense foliage and navigating treacherous terrain, Jackson finally saw it, tall spires peeking through the greenery. The city of Aria was real. As Jackson stepped closer, the jungle sea Jackson stepped them to grow quieter, as if even the animals dared not approach the ruins. His heart raced as he stood at the entrance of the city, its massive stone gates adorned with intricate carvings of long-forgotten gods. With a deep breath, he pushed open the gates, the heavy stone creaking ominously. Inside, the city was eerily silent, with only the occasional rustle of leaves and the distant sound of water dripping from the cracked walls. Jackson marveled at the structures, grand temples, sprawling courtyards, and towering statues, all covered in a thick layer of moss and vines. It was as if time had stopped here, leaving the city frozen in a moment of its former glory. But, as beautiful as it was, Jackson couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. He made his way to the heart of the city, following the map his father had left him. Jackson's father had been an archaeologist too, obsessed with finding Aria, but he had vanished years ago, lost to the jungle. Jackson was determined to finish what his father had started. As he ventured deeper into the ruins, he stumbled upon a massive chamber hidden beneath a crumbling temple. The chamber was filled with ancient relics, golden artifacts, jeweled crowns, and piles of coins. But at the center of the room stood a single pedestal, and on it lay a glowing crystal orb. Jackson's hand shook as he reached for it. This was the heart of Aria, the legendary treasure that could grant unimaginable power to whoever possessed it. Just as Jackson's fingers brushed the surface of the orb, the ground beneath him trembled. The walls of the chamber groaned as if they were alive, and a low, rumbling sound filled the air. Suddenly, the floor gave way, and Jackson fell into darkness. He landed hard on a cold stone floor, dazed and disoriented. As he got to his feet, he realized he was in an underground cavern, far below the city. The air was thick with an otherworldly presence, and the walls seemed to pulse with a strange, dim light. Jackson's heart pounded in his chest as he realized the truth. The curse of Aria was real. Before he could even take a step, shadows began to move around him. Figures emerged from the darkness, their eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. They were the spirits of the city's long-dead inhabitants, trapped in this eternal prison. Jackson felt a chill run down his spine as they drew closer, their faces blank, their movements slow and deliberate. He clutched the orb tightly, unsure of what to do. The legends had warned of a curse, but no one had ever said how to break it. With no other options, Jackson began to run, the spirits close behind him. He could hear their whispers, feel the cold air as they reached out for him, but he didn't stop. The tunnels twisted and turned, and soon Jackson was hopelessly lost. The spirits seemed to be everywhere, blocking his path at every turn. In desperation, he raised the orb above his head, hoping that its power could save him. The orb glowed brighter, filling the cavern with a blinding light. The spirits recoiled, hissing as they faded back into the shadows. For a moment, everything was silent. Jackson stood there, panting, his heart racing. But as the light from the orb began to fade, he realized he wasn't alone. A figure stepped out of the darkness, a tall man with a familiar face. It was Jackson's father. Jackson's breath caught in his throat. "Dad?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. The man nodded, his expression sorrowful. "I'm sorry, son," his father said softly. "I tried to warn you. The curse, it's stronger than you can imagine." Jackson's mind raced. He had come all this way, risking everything, only to find that his father had been a prisoner of the city's curse all along. "There has to be a way out," Jackson said, his voice shaking. His father shook his head slowly. "Once you take the heart of Aria, you belong to the city. Just like me." Jackson looked down at the orb in his hand, the weight of it suddenly unbearable. He'd been so focused on finding the treasure, on fulfilling his father's dream, that he hadn't thought about the consequences. For a moment, Jackson considered dropping the orb, leaving it behind and trying to escape. But then he looked at his father, standing there, trapped in this place for eternity. He couldn't leave him here. With a deep breath, Jackson made a decision. He lifted the orb high and smashed it against the ground. The crystal shattered, and the cavern was filled with a brilliant, blinding light. Jackson shielded his eyes, feeling the ground tremble beneath him. When the light finally faded, the spirits were gone. The curse was broken. Jackson looked around, the ruins of Aria now silent and still. His father was gone too, his soul finally free. Jackson stood there for a long time, staring at the spot where his father had been. The treasure was gone, the city silent once more. But Jackson didn't feel defeated. He had found what he had come for, not gold or jewels, but closure, He had freed his father's soul and broken the curse that had plagued Aria for centuries. As the sun began to set, Jackson made his way back through the jungle, leaving the lost city behind. Aria would remain a mystery to the world, its secrets buried beneath the jungle forever. But Jackson knew the truth, and that was enough.